A restaurant built for one last promise. Some places are created to last. Others are built to fulfill a promise, and then disappear. This restaurant belonged to the second kind. From the moment it opened, its purpose was not growth, legacy, or recognition. It existed to keep a vow that time had nearly erased. The promise was made long before the first table was set, long before permits, menus, or names were chosen. It was spoken quietly, between two people who believed that memory could be protected through care. One of them never lived to see the doors open. The other carried the weight alone. The chef had spent years postponing the idea. Life intervened. Success arrived elsewhere. But the promise lingered unresolved. It wasn't about recreating a past or honoring tradition for its own sake. It was about finishing something that had been interrupted, giving form to words that were never meant to remain abstract. When the restaurant finally opened, it did so without ambition. No marketing, no grand opening, just a small room, deliberately restrained. The menu was short and unchanging, designed not to impress, but to remember. Each dish held significance known only to the chef and the promise it served. Guests sensed it immediately. The food carried gravity. Not heaviness, but intention. Plates arrived without flourish. Portions were exact, almost ceremonial. The room encouraged quiet, not as a rule, but as a response. People spoke less because they felt they were inside something already in progress. To understand why this restaurant mattered, we have to understand what it was not. It was not an experiment, not a business play, not a bid for permanence. It was a holding space, a place designed to exist just long enough to honor what had been lost without exploiting it. But promises, once made public through action, attract attention. And as word spread about a restaurant that felt strangely complete, the pressure began to build. People asked how long it would last. Critics wondered what came next. Investors sensed potential. They did not know that next was never part of the plan, because this restaurant was not meant to evolve. It was meant to conclude, and the closer it came to fulfilling its promise, the more the world around it would test whether anything so finite was allowed to exist. The attention arrived slowly, then all at once. Guests spoke about the restaurant in hushed tones, careful not to flatten the experience into recommendation. Critics struggled to describe it without sounding reverent. The food did not invite superlatives. It invited pause. And that pause unsettled an industry trained to measure momentum. Questions began circling the chef. Would the menu change? Would the concept expand? Would there be another location? He answered none of them directly, not out of secrecy, but because the questions misunderstood the purpose. This restaurant was not a beginning. It was a continuation of something already in motion. And continuations do not need to grow to be complete. Inside the kitchen, the rhythm was precise and restrained. Every movement followed intention, not optimization. The same dishes were cooked night after night, unchanged. Not because they were perfect, but because they were accurate. Accuracy, the chef believed, was a form of respect. The staff felt it. They learned that nothing was casual here. Ingredients were sourced with care that bordered on devotion. Waste was treated as failure, not cost. Silence was not discouraged. It was honored. Cooking felt less like production and more like caretaking. Guests responded in unexpected ways. Some found the experience uncomfortable. They wanted narrative, explanation, a sense of direction. Others felt deeply moved, though they couldn't say why. The restaurant did not guide emotion. It allowed it, and in doing so, it created a space where people brought their own meanings to the table. That openness, however, made the restaurant vulnerable. Investors approached with offers framed as preservation. They spoke of protecting something special from disappearance. They promised stability, scale, and legacy. The chef listened politely, then declined. He understood that protection often arrives with extension, and extension would turn a promise into a project. But the chef knew something they did not. This place was not built for the future. It was built to finish something unfinished. And as pressure mounted to transform the restaurant into more than it was ever meant to be, the chef began to feel the weight of a choice approaching. One that would determine whether the promise would be honored quietly or consumed by the very attention it had never asked for. The choice arrived disguised as opportunity. A cultural foundation reached out, praising the restaurant's restraint and emotional depth. They proposed formal recognition, funding, and protection, ensuring the restaurant could exist indefinitely. The promise, they said, deserved to be preserved for generations. The chef felt the danger immediately. Preservation implied permanence. Permanence implied repetition. And repetition, in this case, would drain the promise of its meaning. The restaurant was not meant to exist forever. It was meant to exist fully. Inside the kitchen, the chef began to feel time differently. Each service carried a quiet finality, as if the room itself knew what was approaching. The dishes tasted the same, but they felt heavier, layered with the knowledge that they were not rehearsals. They were fulfillments. The staff sensed it too. They worked with increased care, not because standards had changed, but because endings sharpened attention. No one asked how long this would continue. Everyone understood that naming an end would fracture something sacred. Then came the night that clarified everything. A guest, unaware of the promise, thanked the chef and said they hoped to return many times in the future. The chef smiled, but the words landed painfully. He realized that by allowing the restaurant to continue indefinitely, he would turn the promise into something people could postpone appreciating. Meaning would stretch thin. Completion would never arrive. That night, alone in the dining room, the chef set a date. No announcement, no countdown, just a quiet decision. The restaurant would close once the promise was fully honored, not when attention faded, not when pressure grew unbearable, but when the work felt complete. This was not an ending driven by loss. It was an ending chosen with intention. As the final weeks unfolded, nothing outwardly changed. The menu stayed the same. Service remained calm. Guests continued to arrive unaware they were participating in something finite. And in that unknowing, the promise was protected from becoming performance. The emotional peak was not dramatic. It was clarity. Clarity that some things matter precisely because they end. That fulfillment does not require legacy. And that honoring a promise sometimes means resisting the instinct to preserve it. The final service was approaching. And with it, the moment when the chef would discover whether completion could feel like peace or something far more difficult to accept. The final night arrived without ceremony. No signs marked it. No speeches warned the room. Guests entered as they always had, unaware that the promise was about to be completed. The chef cooked with the same restraint he always had, but every movement carried intention sharpened by finality. The dishes tasted unchanged, yet they felt different, more present, as if the food itself understood there would be no repetition to follow. Plates were cleared slowly. Conversations lingered without urgency. Something in the room encouraged people to stay just a little longer, though none could explain why. When the last table left, the staff gathered quietly. No applause, no tears, just a shared stillness that felt earned. The chef thanked them simply, not for their work, but for their care. He extinguished the lights himself and stood alone in the dining room, listening to the silence settle. The restaurant closed the next day. Questions followed immediately. Critics speculated. Guests expressed disbelief. Investors reached out one last time, sensing regret where there was none. The chef declined every conversation. He understood that explaining the ending would turn completion into justification. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. The restaurant did not fade. People spoke about it differently than other closed places, not with nostalgia, with gratitude. They didn't ask why it ended. They spoke about how it felt while it existed. The meals became reference points in memory, not because they were rare, but because they were complete. The chef did not open another restaurant. He did not recreate the menu elsewhere. The promise had been kept. Repetition would have been erosion. He carried the peace of knowing that something had been done fully, without extension, without dilution. In a culture obsessed with growth and permanence, this ending offered another model, that some creations are meant to conclude. That meaning does not require scale. That legacy is not always built by continuing, but by stopping at the right moment. The restaurant built for one last promise did exactly what it was meant to do. It existed. It fulfilled. It ended. And in that deliberate ending, it proved that completion can be as powerful as continuation. if we are willing to let it be enough. Subscribe to join the journey. A